In this video, I'm talking with Brayne from EMDR Focus. Mark will explain how to do EMDR virtually better. He will share his own tips and tricks and what we should think about when doing EMDR virtually, including sound, camera angles, the bilateral stimulation tools that he's using, and more. So if you're an EMDR therapist, take a look. All right, Mark Brayne, welcome to the Art and Science of EMDR.
Good to be with you.
Thanks so much for being here. Mark, you are a BBC and Reuters foreign correspondent with Cold War era posting in different areas of the world, including Berlin, Moscow, Vienna, Beijing, and you've been trained in the 1990s as a transpersonal psychotherapist. You've been treating your clients with EMDR since 2004. You've been also an EMDR Europe accredited consultant since 2011.
That's right.
Your work is influenced by Laura Purnell's attachment-focused EMDR, and you now teach your advanced EMDR workshops, Unleash Your EMDR, Release the Magic. And recently, you transitioned your practice to exclusively working virtually. So I wonder if you can share a little bit about what inspired you to transition to all virtual.
As BBC foreign correspondent based in Beijing, Vienna and Beijing in particular, they were my sort of big postings. And then as diplomatic correspondent for the BBC World Service covering the end of the Cold War, I was working virtually all the time. As radio correspondent, I wasn't working with pictures, I was working with sound. And broadcasting to the world down telephone lines from pretty remote places. I'm obviously from Beijing, from a studio in Beijing that was very similar to the one I now use here in North Norfolk in the UK. But when I was on the road, from hotel rooms, from reporting booths, from out in the open air, and putting it down a telephone line, a sort of crackly telephone line. But I got extremely used to communicating remotely with my audience, with the people with whom I was seeking to communicate. So I feel very comfortable doing that anyway. Transitioning from Reuters, the written word, to the spoken word, so communicating directly with individual listeners, one-on-one, which is what radio is. And then once I got going with EMDR in 2004, building it on top of my integrative transpersonal training, and very much the art and the science of psychotherapy and EMDR, very much, we share a passion for the art of psychotherapy. I discovered very intensely the work of fellow trauma therapists, particularly in the United States, like Bessel van der Kolk and so on, and started going to the annual conferences of the ISTSS, the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies in North America. I did that for 5 years, and so I really got across the science of it as well as the art of it. But the key thing was that I carved out fairly immediately a kind of specialism in trauma and journalism. And I set up, with colleagues from the United States, to set up an outfit in Europe called the DART Center for Journalism and Trauma, funded by the DART Corporation, charitable foundation in the US. And I found myself working with journalists around the world, doing psychotherapy and increasingly doing EMDR. So I was already working online with psychotherapy from about, I think the key transition, Rotem, was 2008. I took in a sabbatical and cycled across Europe and back again. And I had to keep my key clients going, so I was doing it on the telephone.
So when you say cycle, just because I know your history a little bit, you mean cycling? You're
I mean cycling, bilateral stimulation. Bilateral stimulation on two wheels. 4,000 miles to Budapest and back. So I was working from. I was just keeping my clients going, a key number of international journalists. So I was completely comfortable with working at many, many levels with people remotely.
Yeah, I know that until recently it was kind of a controversial, a lot of therapists, especially, people who've been trained, to be with the client. There's a lot of importance of being in the same space with the client. It used to be controversial, and that the current pandemic kind of like hit us all in the face, and we had to really adjust the way we work. But it sounds like you've been comfortable doing that for a while.
And what was interesting at the beginning of the pandemic, sort of a year ago, more or less exactly a year ago, as we're speaking now, I was already advocating work using EMDR online. I'd written articles about it. I was encouraging discussion in the EMDR Association UK. My first article on this was published in 2013, advocating remote EMDR at that point on Skype. And then I discovered Zoom. I've been working on Zoom for 4 or 5 years, or 4 years probably already, doing EMDR, working out the bilateral stimulation, either with the butterfly hug or with headphones off an app. So I'd worked out ways of using EMDR online, and I was increasingly switching to online anyway, because I was getting people from the States, from Australia, from around, Middle East, journalists in the Middle East in particular, wanting to work with me online. But that was the only way to work. So I was going down to London for 2 or 3 days a week, and increasingly finding myself working online from the office in London, as much as I'm working online with people from home in North Norfolk on the North Sea coast. So when the pandemic came, it was very interesting that the initial response of the EMDR community in Europe was, panic, panic. And the advice that went out from EMDR Europe was, don't do it, basically. Certainly don't start any new clients online. And even with those that you are working with online, stick to resourcing and sort of stabilization. I absolutely hit the roof, Rotom. I really did. I got very exercised behind the scenes and said, this is crazy. We can do this stuff online. And in the space of about 2 weeks flat, a number of us really, really pushed it. We've got some guidelines together, put them on the EMDR Association UK website, on my website. Jamie Marich in Ohio and I did a webinar that was very widely viewed.
Yeah, saying, hey, I just wanted to mention that as you talked about in the beginning of the pandemic, I watched it, and I know as many of my colleagues watched that webinar that you did, and was really, really helpful. And I will link down to it below, so people can watch. I know that you've done recently a 1 year later bigger panel discussion with Jamie Marich and other therapists. So I'll link to that as well, so people can learn more about that. So I want to ask you, what are the first things that EMDR therapists working virtually need to pay attention to when working virtually, making this transition?
It's a number of, first of all, trust it. First of all, have confidence. Because if you have confidence as a therapist, even if you don't have confidence, fake it to make it, quite honestly. We owe it to our clients. They will feel the confidence from you. So you establish, I'm okay with this. Hey, it might be a bit interesting to start with. I mean, virtually everybody watching this will already be working online. So the grandmothers know now how to suck eggs. So we're beyond that, thank goodness. Yeah. But there are some details, Rotem, that are really important for therapists to take on board. And that includes, for instance, being professional in how you dress, in the quality of your kit, in the quality of your microphone, headphones. I actually encourage both clients and therapists to wear headphones when they're working with EMDR, because it's very, very intimate. And very close. It's actually more intimate and more face-to-face than working in person in a room, because you're actually closer. I mean, your face is now about 3 feet in front of me, 2.5 feet in front of me. Right. We wouldn't be sitting this close in the room.
That's
so
true.
It's very, very safe but close.
Yeah.
So you want to have the eyes. You and I both have our eyes a third of the way down the screen. Any photographers viewing this will know the rule of thirds.
The rule of thirds.
That's how we work. You have a perfect rule of thirds. I have a pretty perfect rule of thirds. So eyes, third of the way down the screen. Eyes horizontal, looking at the camera horizontally. The fascinating thing about working online is that the brain recalibrates eye contact. Even though I'm looking at your eyes on screen and the camera's there,
right,
top of the screen, the brain recalibrates that and it feels like you're looking into my eyes. It's like eye contact. Fascinating. You soon forget the fact that, if I now look in the camera, it doesn't feel like eye contact anymore because we got used to sort of, it's like those bicycles. If you reverse the wheels, you quite quickly learn how to ride a bike with the wheel going the wrong way.
right.
So make sure you've got good broadband. Get the tech right. Invest in a decent machine. I'd encourage people to have a monitor, not working on a laptop. Do not look down at your clients on a laptop that's sitting on the desk in front of you, below you. One of the things that was pointed out to me by one of my trainees, in fact, a trainee stroke a client of mine, supervisee, mixing all the boundaries there, a colleague with whom I'd done a bit of therapy, she pointed out that looking up a male's nostrils, needless to say, can you think of activities that they might have been forced to do as children?
Yeah.
Looking up from below at a male's face. So you've got to take this stuff seriously. Really respect your clients. Take the time, make the investment, and get the backdrop right. I have soundproofing in my padded cell. You've got books, lovely background. Actually wrote them. If you haven't got a fancy podcast microphone like you've got one, I've got one. The battle of the mics. Then, if you're listening to your client on the laptop, I would encourage headphones, USB headphones, hardwired, by the way, not Bluetooth because they always go down.
Mm-hmm.
If you are listening on the speakers of your laptop or your computer, then get yourself a microphone, stick it into the USB port so that the client hears you close up. So I've got tap, tap, tap. There's my microphone.
Right.
But I would normally, and I'll just do a quick little test for you. If we now just listen to the sound. So I've got three options. I'm working here on a mic, on a podcast microphone. Bear with me just a second. My machine is just playing up, doing other things as they sometimes do. If I now switch the microphone to the computer's microphone, that is a staggering.
Yeah, can barely.
Look, that's just not personal.
I can barely hear you with that.
That's the microphone on the computer. But if I go to my headphone, actually, if I go to the headphone, that's really, really intimate. I can whisper in a client's ear.
Yeah.
I can actually, we can. When we're working with very young ego states, we're 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and we're telling stories. We're almost sort of, it's a bedtime story. The EMDR can sometimes be so gentle, so powerful, that wearing headphones, listening to the client in your ears, speaking to them here on this microphone, it's very, very tender and very connected.
Yeah.
I will go back to my...
Yeah. It's a lot better with your Rode microphone.
So there's just some ideas. I've got a whole load of stuff up on the EMDR Focus website, which people are very welcome to look at.
Yeah, which I obviously I'm going to link in down below. So thank you, Mark, for demonstrating that because it's a huge difference between your microphone and just low quality, and we want to continue to provide the best level of care that we can with what we have. I want to ask you a little bit about what do we need to be concerned about. So I know that in the past they used to say not to do therapy in general, and then EMDR in particular, because of what do you do if your client is destabilized? When you're in the office, you feel like you're more in control. What do you do in case your client dissociates or your client becomes extremely anxious in a session? What can an EMDR therapist do in that kind of situation?
Well, first of all, you want your client to become extremely anxious in the session because you want to activate the stories that need to be addressed. Right. I mean, you want to get them fired up. I mean, that's how EMDR works.
Right. And I mean, over the window of tolerance.
Way out of the window of tolerance, yeah. the interesting thing is that we're doing a big piece of research over in the UK, which we're getting together with Sheffield University, and the questionnaires are going to be going out next month, and we'll put them out. We'll send them out to anybody who cares to fill them in on their experience and their clients' experience of working online with EMDR. What the universal message that's coming back so far is that people have not found dissociation or excessive activation of a client any more of a problem online than it is in person. Clearly, if you're working with somebody in person, you're going to be being careful for safeguarding and support and so on. I mean, I lost a client to suicide just over a year ago. These things can happen. And that was working in person with a little bit of online.
Yeah.
But the same considerations apply online as they would in person. When you're working in person with somebody, they're only with you for an hour a week. So don't kid yourself that you're somehow able to maintain safety for them for the rest of the week. It just isn't true. And so when you're working with online, there's no difference fundamentally. And also they're working from home. They're working from the safety of their own home. Safety, you obviously have to make sure that they are in a sufficiently safe environment with the doors closed, and also check in with them. What is their domestic situation? Are they going to go straight back out into an abusive relationship? But that applies in person too. And in person, they have to leave home and go across town, come to your office, and they may be very activated by that experience. So working online isn't necessarily of itself more dangerous or more alarm generating than working in person. Somebody who dissociates, the old throwing a pillow thing, throw a pillow, ready, catch it, catch this, ready, you get that? And you get them to play, so that you get them to just take one, just take a tissue, because you can't give a client a tissue.
Yeah.
But if you've got tissue, then I throw you that, you throw it back, and I catch it, and in no time at all, the client's back in the room with you. Back of the head scale, Jim Knight, checking in, You want them about here, forward of here. It's all the same stuff applies. I've not had any issues online that are any more alarming than I've had in person.
Right. So all these things that we've been taught to do to stabilize our client in person, we can do virtually, including back of the head scale and throwing something, essential oils we can use, or even
we
ice.
have to get them. Yeah, we have to obviously get them to set it up.
Yeah.
And I find animals very useful. Lots of clients have pets. They don't bring them to the office, but they have them available locally, and pets are always good news.
Yes.
For therapy pets. I mean, pets always say the right thing.
Yeah. Okay. I'm wondering, Mark, if you can share a little bit of the tools. So what tools do you use to activate bilateral stimulation, and any other piece of advice when working virtually, when doing EMDR virtually with clients?
The BLS has been a bit of a journey. I started off with using an app called BSDR Player. It just generates bilateral tones. Super little app. I used that for years, and I'll share my screen with you. I'll show you. I'll just show you a picture of how people would use it. Bear with me just a moment.
Of course.
Pictures online. Download it online. Have a look here. I've got a picture of. Sorry, that's the wrong one. I'm just checking my. Where are we? Online. EMDR Focus online. Pictures online. Online pictures. So let me just share my screen with you, and I'll show you. So what I used to do. Okay, so there's sharing the screen. So if I've worked with people in a car, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with people in a car. The virtual background in Zoom is worth, by the way, highlighting the importance of. This is a colleague of mine. This is a virtual background, an alternative virtual background, and outside. If you're using a Zoom virtual background, people prefer an indoors one, not an outside one, and you don't want the northern lights or palm trees waving with the beach. That is not conducive to therapy. A bookshelf in the background is a very good idea, a neutral background of some sort. You've got to be careful to get your color inversion right. This is another colleague. He had a green screen. It was a bit amateurish, but you can get Zoom to sort of, behave itself. Now this is, again, how I set it up before the pandemic, this one, interestingly. So I would have Zoom on a window within a window, and then put a clock underneath it, just a clock app in Windows.
Interesting.
So I'd have the clock running here. Now, can you see this client, again, with using his picture with permission? Yeah. He's got his headphones, his main headphones over the top that he's listening to me on, but he's got earbuds underneath.
Oh, so wow.
He's got headphones at the same time. And he's running the bilateral stimulation. He's starting and stopping it himself locally. So that worked very well. There's another colleague who could you see she's got earbuds underneath the main headphones, again with my clock underneath. But this is a year ago. Can you see that she's got the underneath there?
Yes, I haven't seen that yet.
That's me and Jamie having fun.
Yeah.
What I want to show you now, though, is the app that I do use, the app that I use now. So let me just find myself, where are we? Okay, let's just find that. Now, what I use now universally is an app called Bilateral Base, an instant session, and I'll just show this to you. It's invented and managed and sold and sort of managed across the planet now by a colleague of mine. We work very closely on this. And here, you've got the bar across there. The client has not joined the session yet. Here you've got the BLS. You can start it. You can do a light bar, audio BLS on the headphones. I won't run here because we're running on Zoom, but you start it up here.
Yes.
You can hear the beeps going, so left, right. You can change the effect to a drum, clock, pop. You can change the color of the light bar, color of the dot, change the speed up and down. You can pause it. It'll tell you how long the set has gone, the number of passes, the number of sets you've done, start and stop. You can record a session. You can share a screen. You can shift your microphone and the gear you've got here, the interface, the sound, the kind of headphones you're using, the microphone you're using. And it's all HIPAA compliant and everything. So it's absolutely top class, really is. Cost about.
Yes, I did an interview with Katie, the founder of Bilateral Base, and she also demonstrated. So thanks for showing that. It's a wonderful app. It makes our life a little bit easier by saving client settings, so you don't need to figure out what color, what speed of BLS.
It remembers it from client to client.
It just saves it. So yeah.
And the client also, what's really important is the client has a unique URL.
Right.
And it runs in a browser, so it's much more secure. It doesn't go through any servers anywhere. Bilateral Base doesn't save anything beyond. You could give clients just numerals or initials. So it's all security compliant and GDPR and HIPAA compliant.
Yeah.
And also one interesting thing, Rotem, that's important to highlight is that it does allow you as therapists to start and stop. So you generate the beginning and the end of each set. And there was a lot of discussion in EMDR until a year ago at the time. Is it still EMDR if the client is having to start and stop their own bilateral stimulation?
Right.
Is the butterfly hug sufficient?
Right.
Is it okay?
Right. So Andrea actually recently changed the definition of EMDR, and it now has to be operated by a therapist. So self EMDR, and there are some websites out there that encourage people to do their own EMDR without a therapist. That is not considered EMDR.
That's not EMDR. No, quite right too. But I hope that what's very important to identify is that the butterfly hug, hooking the thumbs together like this, working like this. Guerrero in what's his name in Mexico, I think, advocates this. in particular, it's very, very effective, and the client
Yes.
does it themselves, start and stop. That is definitely EMDR. Anybody who might come in and say that's not acceptable EMDR, I'd just argue them straight out of court.
Right. And what I usually use, like bilateral base, but I know that when I do tap with clients, I tap with the client. So, and
You
I
can
try
often
to
do that.
do it in sync.
Yep. And there's a resonance, a kind of mirror neuron
Right.
resonance.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, Mark, thank you so much. That was very, very helpful. I'm sure that it will help a lot of EMDR therapists to kind of up their game and, do EMDR with more confidence while we still working virtually. So I want to thank you so much for being with me here today.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
I've always got one more thing to say.
Yes.
And that is that I think this is a game changer. I think the COVID pandemic has been an absolute game changer for the whole field of psychotherapy. And we are not going back to where we were before.
No.
For clients and therapists who want to work in person, great.
Right.
But online therapy works, and it makes it so much more accessible. I personally prefer working online to working in person for lots of reasons. I think actually it's more focused, efficient, generates the results. It's at least as efficient and effective as working in person. And I think on the whole, in the way I work, more so. So if there's anybody watching these videos who feels somehow that they need to argue with the EMDR establishment, the psychotherapeutic establishment, that somehow working online is second best, don't do that. Because it's not second best, it's different, but it's sufficiently similar to be equally valid to all the research and the practice and the experience of 100 years of psychotherapy is just as valid for working online in terms of building relationship and intimacy and co-creating a therapeutic container. All this stuff is just as valid for working online as it is in person.
Yes.
In fact, it gives us a whole stack of extra tools.
Yes, I agree with you that this pandemic changed a lot of what we thought we knew about the world, not just in our field, in many other fields.
Oh, yeah.
And I agree with you. The post-COVID is not going to be, going back to pre-COVID. A lot of things are going to change. I think a lot of clients, I can share I got my first vaccine and getting my second vaccine in 3 days, and I started asking clients if they want to come back to the office, and some clients are just they don't need to drive, they don't need to find parking, they just can do EMDR virtually, and it's as effective, and I think we've all been seeing that over the last year or so, that it's as effective. So I agree with you 100% on that.
And of course, it's also turning out to be extremely effective in the training of EMDR, which is a subject I think we're now going to shade into.
Right. Okay, Mark, thank you so much again.
Great pleasure, Roger. Lovely. Really,
Soon.
really good questions. Great to be talking about these.
Thank you.